The longship cut through the cold waves of the northern sea, its dragonhead prow slicing the dawn mist as men and women pulled hard at the oars. At the stern, Olrun Freydottir stood tall, her braided auburn hair whipping in the salt wind, one hand on the tiller, the other gripping her father's sword. The men under her command cast wary glances toward her, their whispers carrying across the deck. "A woman cannot lead a raid," muttered Bjorn, a grizzled warrior whose beard bore the grey of many winters. "The gods will turn their backs on us." Olrun pretended not to hear, though every word cut deeper than any blade. She kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, where the English coastline emerged from the morning haze. Her father Fry had been a mighty jarl, but fever had taken him 3 moons past, leaving no sons behind. Only her, a shield maiden who had fought alongside her father since she could lift a sword. "The gods favor the bold," she called out, loud enough for all to hear. "And we are bold. Today we honor my father's memory with glory and plunder." A few voices raised in agreement, but most remained silent. Olrun knew what they thought: a woman's place was at the loom, not at the helm. She would prove them wrong or die trying. This was the way of her people: respect was earned through steel and courage, not given freely. And without respect, she could never hope to claim her birthright as chieftain at the Thing assembly when they returned. Since childhood, Olrun had believed one truth above all others: a woman must be twice as fierce, twice as cunning, and twice as ruthless as any man to earn half the honor. Her mother had whispered this to her before death took her, and Olrun had carved those words into her heart alongside another belief: compassion was weakness, especially in a leader. The clan needed strength, not softness. This raid would prove she possessed that strength. "Land approaches," called the lookout. "Prepare yourselves." The warriors checked their weapons and shields. Olrun pulled her helmet low over her brow and drew her father's sword. The blade caught the rising sun, gleaming like fire in her hand. "Remember," she shouted, "take what you can carry, burn what you cannot. Leave none who would raise arms against us." The longship ground against the shingle beach, and with a mighty battle cry, the raiders poured forth onto English soil. Olrun led them, her shield high, her sword hungry for blood and glory. This day would be the first of many that would silence the doubters forever. The monastery's bell tolled frantically as the Vikings approached. Monks scattered like frightened birds, some fleeing inland, others rushing to hide their precious manuscripts and relics. Olrun's warriors spread out efficiently, securing the perimeter before moving toward the main buildings. "Take what is valuable," she commanded. "The gold, the silver, the manuscripts." As her warriors pillaged, Olrun strode toward the church, where most of the treasures would be kept. She kicked open the heavy wooden door, her sword ready, only to find herself facing not cowering monks but a single man standing before the altar. He wore no armor, carried no weapon, yet did not cower. "If you seek God's treasures, you must go through me," he said in the Norse tongue, his accent strange but understandable. Olrun raised an eyebrow, surprised by his boldness and his command of her language. "You speak the words of the North. Who are you to stand against me, Englishman?" "I am brother Bjorn Leo Freydson," he replied. "Half Norse by my father, though raised among these good people. I would ask you to spare their lives, if not their gold." Olrun circled him warily. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with hair the color of wheat fields and eyes blue as the summer sky. Not a warrior's build but strong nonetheless, with hands that looked more accustomed to working stone or than wielding a quill. "Step aside, brother Bjorn," she mocked the title. "I have no quarrel with you, but I will take what I came for." "Take the gold," he said, gesturing to the altar's treasures. "But grant mercy to those who shelter here. They are scholars and healers, not warriors." Something in his steady gaze unsettled her. No man had ever looked at her so directly, without fear or lust or contempt. He looked at her as if seeing beyond her armor to something she herself could not name. "Mercy," she laughed harshly. "Would your people show mercy to mine?" "The Christians burn our temples when they find them and call us heathens." "Not all Christians are alike, just as not all Norse are raiders," Bjorn replied. "Judge these men by their own deeds, not the deeds of others." His words struck her like a physical blow. Judged by deeds, not blood, it contradicted everything she had been taught about enemies and allies. Before she could respond, shouts erupted outside, followed by the clash of steel. "Defenders come," called one of her men, rushing into the church. "Armed men from the village." Olrun cursed. They had been told this monastery was isolated, an easy target. How many? 24 at least, with more behind. She turned back to Bjorn, suspicion flaring. "Did you delay me purposely while they gathered their forces?" "No," he said simply. "But I will not apologize for their coming." With a growl, Olrun pressed her blade to his throat. "You will come with us. A monk who speaks Norse will fetch a good price as a thrall, or serve as hostage if needed." Before he could protest, she called to her warriors. "Take what you can and retreat to the ships. We are outnumbered." Her men grabbed what treasures they could carry and raced for the beach. 2 of her strongest warriors seized Bjorn, binding his hands before dragging him along. As they fled, arrows whistled past them, one grazing Olrun's cheek, drawing blood that she ignored. The raiders reached their longship just as the mounted English defenders closed in. They pushed off from shore under a hail of arrows, warriors raising their shields to protect the rowers. Olrun stood proudly at the stern, blood running down her face, glaring defiance at their pursuers until they were safely beyond reach. Only then did she notice Bjorn watching her, his expression not of hatred or fear, but something closer to curiosity. "You fight well for a woman," he said, sitting bound near the mast. "And you speak boldly for a captive," she retorted, wiping blood from her cheek. "Where do you take me?" Olrun looked north, toward home. "To a land where gods still walk among men, brother Bjorn. Pray to your Christ that he can find you there." 3 days of rough seas tested even the hardiest warriors. Most suffered in silence, but some could not hide their belief that the storm was punishment for following a woman. When lightning cracked the sky and thunder shook the very boards beneath their feet, Kolbein voiced what others whispered. "The gods show their displeasure," he shouted over the howling wind. "Odin demands a man lead his warriors." Olrun's hand tightened on her sword hilt, but before she could respond, the ship lurched violently, nearly throwing men overboard. A massive wave crashed over them, sweeping one unfortunate warrior into the churning sea. His screams were quickly swallowed by the tempest. "Secure the cargo!" Olrun commanded, fighting to keep her footing on the slick deck. "And the captive!" Through the driving rain, she saw Bjorn struggling against his bonds as water sloshed around him. Without hesitation, she drew her knife and cut him free. "If we capsize, you'll drown tied like that," she explained, having to shout to be heard. Surprise registered on his face. "You show concern for a thrall's life." "I show concern for valuable property," she corrected sharply, though something in her rejected the callousness of her own words. "Now make yourself useful. Help bail water before we all feed the fishes." To her surprise, Bjorn did as commanded, working alongside the warriors to keep the ship from foundering. Hour after hour they battled the storm, muscles straining, fingers bleeding from the rough work. When one man collapsed from exhaustion, Bjorn took his place without being asked, earning grudging nods from the other warriors. Finally, as dawn broke on the 4th day, the storm abated, leaving them all drenched and weary but alive. Olrun checked their course, relief flooding her when she spotted familiar landmarks on the horizon. They were near home waters. That night, as most of the crew slept, Olrun kept watch, unwilling to trust anyone else after coming so close to disaster. She was startled when Bjorn sat beside her, his bonds loose enough to allow movement but not escape. "Your men believe the storm was sent because a woman leads them," he said quietly. "My men believe many foolish things," she replied, though doubt gnawed at her. What if they were right? What if the gods themselves opposed her? "My God teaches that all souls are equal in his eyes," Bjorn continued. "Man or woman, free or slave." Olrun scoffed. "Pretty words from a faith that burns women as witches when they show strength. Those who do such things betray Christ's teachings," he said firmly. "Just as those who doubt your leadership because you are a woman betray their own eyes, which surely see your courage and skill." She studied him in the moonlight. Why do you speak kindly to your captor? I took you from your home, your god's house. Perhaps because I see beyond the shield and saw to the woman who freed me during the storm, when letting me drown would have been easier. Olrun looked away, uncomfortable with his perception. Rest while you can, monk. Tomorrow we reach my homeland, and there you will learn what it means to be thrall to Norse masters. Yet as Bjorn retreated to his place among the cargo, Olrun found herself troubled by his words and the strange feeling they awakened in her, a feeling that perhaps there was another way to prove her worth beyond ruthlessness and bloodshed. The settlement of fjords spread along the sheltered bay, its wooden buildings nestled between steep mountains. Smoke rose from longhouses, and children paused in their play to watch the returning ship. The raid had been less successful than hoped. The monastery's treasures were modest, and they had lost 2 men, but they returned with captives and enough plunder to save face. As they docked, Olrun saw her uncle Hakon waiting on the shore, his expression thunderous. Beside him stood several of the settlement's elders, their faces equally grim. Niece, Hakon called as she stepped ashore, deliberately omitting her name or any title of respect. You return with less than you promised. The monastery was poorer than our information suggested, she replied evenly, and we faced unexpected resistance. So a woman's leadership brings us meager rewards and dead warriors, Hakon said loudly enough for all to hear. As was foretold. Anger flashed through Olrun. No one foretold anything, uncle. You simply cannot stomach that my father named me his heir rather than you. Murmurs rippled through the gathering crowd. Hakon's face darkened. The thing will decide who leads this clan, girl. Not a deathbed whim from a fever-addled man. My father's mind was clear when he named me, Olrun countered, standing tall despite her exhaustion. And I will claim what is mine by right at the thing. We shall see, Hakon smiled coldly. The assembly gathers in 1 moon's time. Until then, remember your place. As her uncle strode away, Olrun felt the weight of many eyes upon her, some sympathetic, others doubtful, most merely curious to see how this unusual situation would unfold. No woman had ever become chieftain in their clan's history. Many believed it was not just unlikely but impossible. She turned to oversee the unloading of their plunder and captives, including Bjorn, who observed the exchange with keen interest. Your uncle seems determined to challenge you, he remarked as she approached. My uncle believes women belong at the loom or in bed, not leading warriors, she replied tersely. As do most men here. And yet your father believed otherwise. Olrun paused, the grief of her father's passing still fresh. My father saw me fight, hunt, and lead since childhood. He knew my worth. She gestured to a warrior nearby. Take this one to Ulfhild's house. She has need of a strong back for her smithy. As Bjorn was led away, he called back to her, remember, Olrun Freydottir, true leadership is proven not by how much blood you spill, but by how much you prevent from being spilled. His words followed her through the settlement as she made her way to her father's, now her longhouse. Inside, the hearth fire had burned low, and dust had settled on the carved wooden furniture. No one had tended it properly in her absence. She sank onto a bench, suddenly overwhelmed by the challenge before her. To become chieftain, she needed the support of the Thing, the assembly of free men who would vote on clan leadership. She had 1 moon to prove herself worthy, to convince enough of them that a woman could lead as well as any man. But how? The raid had not brought the glory she'd hoped for. What could she do to win their respect? The answer came to her as she stared into the dying embers. She would host a feast to distribute the raid's wealth, showing generosity and strength. And she would organize a hunting expedition to provide the meat, leading it herself. No one could question her courage if she brought down the biggest prey. With renewed determination, Olrun stoked the fire back to life. 1 moon to change generations of tradition. 1 moon to fulfill her father's faith in her. 1 moon to prove that a woman could lead. The great boar crashed through the underbrush, tusks gleaming wickedly in the dappled forest light. Behind it raced Olrun, spear in hand, her hunting party spread out to prevent the beast's escape. For 3 days they had tracked this enormous creature, and now the moment of killing was at hand. Drive it toward the clearing, she shouted, her blood singing with the thrill of the hunt. The boar, cornered and desperate, wheeled suddenly and charged straight at her. 600 pounds of muscle and fury with tusks that could disembowel a warrior in seconds. Olrun stood her ground, spear braced against the earth, its point aimed at the beast's heart. At the last possible moment, she twisted aside, driving her spear deep into the charging animal as it passed. The boar's momentum carried it forward, the shaft snapping as the creature tumbled to the ground, bellowing in pain but not yet dead. Before anyone could intervene, Olrun drew her sword and leaped upon the wounded beast, driving her blade into its throat. Hot blood sprayed across her face and arms as the boar gave a final shudder and died. Standing over her kill, chest heaving, Olrun raised her blooded sword. "A worthy feast for our guests!" The hunting party cheered, all except her cousin Eirik, Hakon's son, who watched with barely concealed disdain. "A lucky thrust," he muttered to his companions. "The gods favor fools and women today." Olrun pretended not to hear as they bound the boar's legs to a pole for the journey home. This hunt was crucial to her plan. The great feast she was preparing would showcase her ability to provide for the clan, the chieftain's most important duty. The monastery's gold would be distributed, alliances reinforced, and support for her leadership cemented before the thing. As they approached the settlement, Olrun noticed unusual activity near the shoreline. A ship had arrived, not one of their own but from a neighboring fjord. Her pulse quickened. Visitors meant potential allies or enemies in her bid for leadership. "Whose ship?" she asked a young boy who ran past. "Jarl Sigurd's from Ornfjord," the boy replied excitedly. "They bring offer of alliance through marriage." Olrun's blood went cold. Marriage alliances were common among the Norse, binding clans together through blood. But if Jarl Sigurd offered marriage, it would not be to her, it would be for her. And if she married into another clan, her claim to leadership here would vanish like morning mist. She found Hakon in the great hall, already deep in conversation with the visiting Jarl, a bear of a man with a grey-streaked beard and calculating eyes. Both men fell silent as she entered, still blood-spattered from the hunt. "Niece," Hakon said with false warmth, "you returned just in time. Jarl Sigurd brings an offer that may interest you." "Indeed." Olrun kept her voice neutral as she approached. "I bring a great boar for our feast. All in the fjord will eat well tonight." Jarl Sigurd assessed her with open curiosity. "So this is Frey's daughter, who thinks herself a jarl. You hunt like a man, girl." "I hunt like a chieftain," she corrected him. "One who provides for her people." The jarl laughed heartily. "Spirit! I like that in a woman, within reason." He turned to Hakon. "My son Gunnar would tame her well, I think. A strong match for both our clans." "My uncle has no authority to negotiate my marriage," Olrun said coldly. "I am my father's heir, and until the thing decides otherwise, I speak for myself." Hakon's face darkened. "Watch your tongue, girl. Jarl Sigurd offers an honorable alliance. Gunnar is his only son and heir. You would be the wife of a future chieftain, a proper place for a woman of your breeding. And what of my father's wishes? What of my claim?" Olrun demanded. "A woman cannot lead warriors," Jarl Sigurd stated as if explaining to a child. "It is not our way. But as Gunnar's wife, you would bring your father's bloodline to our clan's leadership. Your sons would rule both fjords one day." Olrun felt trapped, the walls of tradition closing in around her. Before she could respond, a commotion arose outside, and moments later, Ulfhild the smith burst into the hall. "Forgive the interruption," the older woman panted, "but raiders approach from the sea. 3 ships, moving fast." All thoughts of marriage alliances vanished as Olrun and the men rushed outside. Through the fjord's narrow entrance came 3 longships, their sails bearing the raven emblem of Jarl Ulfa, a notorious chieftain from the north known for his brutality. "They come for revenge," Hakon said grimly. "We raided their fishing villages last season." "Sound the alarm," Olrun commanded. "Get the children and elders to the caves. Warriors to the shore defenses." When no one moved, she rounded on them furiously. "Now! Jarl Sigurd raised an eyebrow at her tone but nodded to his men, who rushed to their ship to retrieve their weapons. Hakon, seeing he had little choice, gave similar orders to the clan's warriors. As the settlement erupted into activity, Olrun ran to her father's longhouse, quickly donning her armor and gathering her weapons. This attack was both danger and opportunity. If she could lead a successful defense, none could question her fitness to lead. At the shoreline, she found warriors hastily arranging shield walls and positioning archers. Nearby stood Bjorn, who had apparently been working at Ulfhild's forge when the alarm sounded. "You should be in the caves with the other thralls," she told him. "I can fight if given a weapon," he replied. "And I know Jarl Ulfa's tactics, my father served him before fleeing to England." Olrun hesitated only briefly before passing him a spear. "Betray us, and your death will be slow." "I have no love for Ulfa," Bjorn said simply. "He is a man who delights in cruelty, something I believe you are not, despite your efforts to appear so." Before she could respond to this presumption, the first of Ulfa's ships ground against the shingle beach. Warriors poured forth, screaming battle cries, axes and swords raised high. "Hold the line!" Olrun shouted, taking her place at the center of the shield wall. "Let them break against us like waves against stone." The battle joined with a crash of steel and wood. Ulfa's men were numerous but had expected an easy raid on an unprepared settlement. Instead, they met a disciplined defense. Olrun fought like one possessed, her sword finding gaps in enemy shields, her own shield turning aside blows meant to end her life. Beside her fought Bjorn, surprisingly skilled with the spear for a monk. He moved with practiced efficiency, his reach keeping attackers at bay, his strength evident in each thrust. When an axe-wielding raider broke through the line toward Olrun's unprotected flank, it was Bjorn who intercepted the blow, taking a glancing wound to his arm before dispatching the attacker. "You fight well for a man of God," Olrun called to him over the din of battle. "I was a warrior before I was a monk," he replied, wincing as blood soaked his sleeve. Some skills are not easily forgotten. The battle raged along the shore as the remaining ships disgorged their warriors. For every raider that fell, another seemed to take his place. Slowly, inexorably, Olrun's defenders were pushed back toward the settlement. "We cannot hold them much longer," Hakon shouted, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. Olrun saw the truth of his words. They were outnumbered, and soon the raiders would overwhelm them through sheer force. A desperate plan formed in her mind. "Fall back to the longhouses," she commanded. "Draw them into the narrow paths between buildings." The defenders retreated in good order, maintaining their shield wall as they moved. The raiders, sensing victory, pressed forward eagerly, exactly as Olrun had hoped. Once among the buildings, their numbers became a disadvantage, unable to bring their full force to bear in the confined spaces. Olrun led a smaller group around the perimeter, coming up behind the raiders now trapped in the settlement's narrow ways. Caught between two forces, Ulfa's men began to falter. "Now!" Olrun cried, charging into their disordered ranks. The tide of battle turned. Raiders, finding themselves surrounded, either fought to the death or threw down their weapons. By sunset, it was over. Ulfa himself had never left his ship, watching from a safe distance before retreating when the battle went against his men. Olrun stood among the dead and wounded, her armor dented, her sword notched, blood caking her face and hands. Some was her own from a wound across her shoulders, but most belonged to those who had fallen before her. Jarl Sigurd approached, his own armor bearing the marks of hard fighting. He looked at her with newfound respect. "You fight with your father's spirit," he acknowledged grudgingly. "And your strategy saved many lives today." "This is why my father named me heir," Olrun replied, straightening despite her exhaustion. "Not because I am his daughter, but because I can lead." Later, as healers tended the wounded in the great hall, Olrun found Bjorn having his arm bandaged by one of the village women. She dismissed the healer with a gesture and took over the task herself. "You risked your life for mine today," she said quietly as she wound clean linen around his wound. "Why would a thrall do such a thing?" Bjorn met her gaze steadily. "Perhaps I see what others do not, that you fight not for glory or power, but to protect your people. And how would you know that? Because I watched you in battle. You placed yourself where the danger was greatest. You thought of your warriors before yourself. He winced as she tightened the bandage. These are not the actions of someone who desires power for its own sake. Olrun finished her work in silence, troubled by his insight. Finally, she said, you have earned your freedom by your actions today. When you are healed, you may return to your monastery if you wish. Surprise and something else, disappointment, flickered across his face. And if I wish to stay? The question caught her off guard. Why would you choose to remain among heathens? Perhaps I see my purpose here, he said simply. Or perhaps I am curious to see if a woman can indeed become chieftain when all say it cannot be done. Olrun found herself smiling despite her weariness. Then stay and witness it, Bjorn Leo Freydson. For I will be chieftain, no matter what stands in my way. She did not acknowledge, even to herself, the small flame of something unfamiliar that sparked within her at his decision to stay. The great feast to celebrate their victory and honor the fallen transformed into something more significant than Olrun had planned. Warriors who had fought beside her now raised their horns in her name. Even Jarl Sigurd, while not withdrawing his son's marriage offer, treated her with the respect due a fellow leader. As the mead flowed and the great boar she had killed turned on spits over the fire, Olrun moved among her people, sharing the monastery's treasures with generous hands. Gold arm rings for the warriors who had distinguished themselves, silver coins for the families of the fallen, fine cloths for the women who had defended the settlement alongside their men. From his place near the hearth, Bjorn watched her calculated generosity. When she passed near him, he said quietly, you win them with gold and glory, but have you considered winning them with wisdom? Olrun paused, intrigued despite herself. Speak plainly, former monk. Your people face threats from all sides, Ulfa's raiders today, perhaps others tomorrow. They need more than a warrior chieftain, they need a leader who builds alliances rather than enmities. She considered his words as a commotion near the door drew her attention. A familiar figure stumbled into the hall, Arvid, one of their traders who had been away when the raid occurred. Jarl Ulfa prepares a greater force, Arvid announced, his voice carrying over the feast noise. I passed their fjord on my return. He gathers allies, swearing to wipe out our settlement in revenge for today's defeat. The celebration faltered as fear spread through the gathering. Hakon rose from his seat, seeing opportunity in the crisis. We cannot stand against such a force, he declared. We must abandon the settlement, seek refuge with our kin to the south. Flee like cowards. Olrun challenged, stepping into the center of the hall. And what of our ancestors' graves? Our sacred places? Would you surrender everything our forefathers built? Better to live as refugees than die as fools, Hakon countered. No one can withstand Ulfa's full might. No one alone, Olrun agreed. But we are not alone. She turned to Jarl Sigurd. Your fjord also borders Ulfa's territory. If he destroys us, how long before he turns his eyes to your lands? Sigurd stroked his beard thoughtfully. You suggest alliance. I do, Olrun confirmed. Not through marriage, but through mutual need. Ulfa threatens us all. Together, we can end his raids once and for all. And who would lead such an alliance? Hakon demanded. You? A woman not yet even confirmed as chieftain. Before Olrun could respond, Bjorn stepped forward. If I may speak. All eyes turned to him in surprise. Olrun nodded her permission, curious what he might say. In my travels, Bjorn began, I have seen how the Saxon kingdoms unite against common enemies despite their differences. They create councils where each leader has voice, but in battle, they follow the one with greatest skill. Is that not wisdom your gods would approve? To set aside pride for survival. Murmurs of consideration rippled through the hall. Sigurd laughed suddenly, slapping his thigh. The thrall speaks sense. A council of equals, with the best warrior leading in battle. He looked at Olrun appraisingly. And who among us has proven their battlecraft today if not Frey's daughter? Hakon's face darkened. You cannot seriously consider following a woman into battle. I followed her today, called one of the warriors who had fought in the shield wall. And I live because of it. Others joined in agreement, their voices drowning out Hakon's objections. Olrun felt a surge of hope. This was her path to leadership. Not through blood alone, nor gold, but through a new kind of wisdom that even her father might not have imagined. Then let us form this alliance, she declared. Send messengers to all fjords threatened by Ulfa. Invite them to council in 10 days' time. Together we will plan not just our defense, but Ulfa's defeat. As the hall erupted in approving shouts, Olrun's eyes met Bjorn's across the crowded space. He inclined his head slightly, acknowledgement and perhaps something more in his gaze. For the first time, she wondered if there might be strength in a kind of leadership her people had never tried, one that valued wisdom alongside courage, and peace alongside glory. Later, as the feast wound down, Olrun found Bjorn outside, gazing at the stars. Your counsel was timely, she admitted. Though I wonder why you aid me when your god and mine are enemies. Are they? Bjorn asked softly. My god teaches that true leadership is service to others. I see you serving your people, even if you do not name it so. I seek to lead, not serve, Olrun protested. Perhaps the greatest leaders do both, he suggested. Your people follow you not because they fear you, but because you put their needs before your own. That is service, whatever name you give it. Olrun contemplated his words, finding them strangely comforting. Your god and mine may disagree on much, but perhaps on leadership, they find common ground. Perhaps on more than that, Bjorn said, his eyes still on the stars. The heavens above us are the same, whether we call them Asgard's reflection or God's creation. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when a servant approached to tell Olrun that Jarl Sigurd wished to speak with her. As she turned to go, Bjorn spoke once more. The counsel is wise, Olrun. But remember, uniting against a common enemy is easier than remaining united once that enemy is defeated. True leadership looks beyond the immediate battle to the peace that follows. His words followed her back into the hall, planting seeds in fertile ground. The Council of Chieftains gathered in Ravnfjord's Great Hall 10 days later, an unprecedented assembly of rivals and allies alike. 6 jarls and their advisors sat at the long tables, eyeing one another warily, united only by their common threat from the north. Olrun, as host, opened the proceedings. We thank you for answering our call. Jarl Ulfa threatens not just Ravnfjord but all our settlements. His raids grow bolder, his ambitions clearer. He seeks to conquer our lands one by one. And why should we follow Frey's daughter, challenged Jarl Gunnar, a grim-faced leader from the eastern fjords. A woman not even confirmed as chieftain by her own thing. Because she defended successfully against Ulfa's first attack, Jarl Sigurd responded before Olrun could speak. And because she saw the wisdom of alliance when others counselled flight. Debates raged through the day and into the night. Maps were consulted, strategies proposed and dismissed, old grievances aired and set aside. Throughout it all, Olrun listened more than she spoke, weighing each chieftain's strengths and concerns, seeking common ground. Bjorn, present as Olrun's advisor, a position that raised eyebrows but which none dared question after his counsel had proven valuable, noticed her approach with quiet approval. She was learning that leadership came in many forms, not always the loudest voice, but often the most attentive ear. By dawn, a plan had formed. They would not wait for Ulfa's attack but would strike first, uniting their forces in a preemptive raid on his main settlement. Sigurd, impressed by Olrun's strategic mind, proposed that she lead the planning, while each jarl commanded their own warriors under a common strategy. Hakon, seeing his niece's influence growing, made one final attempt to undermine her. The gods must bless our endeavor, he announced. We should consult the seer before committing to this woman's plan. The old Volva was brought forth, her eyes clouded with age, sacred herbs burning in her gnarled hands. The hall fell silent as she entered her trance, swaying and muttering. Finally, she spoke in a voice not her own, the raven's daughter shall lead where men have failed. Blood and fire mark her path, but wisdom guides her hand. Victory comes not through strength alone but through bonds forged in respect. The old ways bend but do not break. Silence followed her pronouncement. The volva collapsed, helped away by attendants, leaving her words hanging in the air. All eyes turned to Olrun, the raven's daughter, for her father's banner had borne the sacred bird of Odin. "The gods have spoken," Jarl Sigurd said solemnly. "We follow the raven's daughter." Hakon's face was ashen, his last weapon turned against him. The seer's prophecy, delivered before all the assembled chieftains, could not be disputed without challenging the gods themselves. As the council dispersed to prepare their warriors, Olrun found herself alone with Bjorn in the emptying hall. "You did not speak during the council," she noted. "It was not my place," he replied. "These are your people, your ways. Yet your ideas shaped my approach," Olrun admitted. "This alliance follows the pattern you described, each leader with a voice, united in common purpose." Bjorn smiled slightly. "Perhaps your gods and mine find agreement in practical matters." "Perhaps." She studied him thoughtfully. "You were a warrior once," you said. "Will you fight alongside us against Ulfa?" "I took vows of peace when I entered the monastery," he said, conflict evident in his eyes. "But I also vow to protect the innocent. Ulfa threatens many such lives." "You need not kill," Olrun offered. "But your knowledge of battle formations would be valuable." "And?" She hesitated, surprising herself with what she was about to admit. "I would value your counsel at my side." Something shifted in Bjorn's expression, a warmth that had been carefully contained now allowed to show more freely. "Then at your side I shall remain, Olrun Freydottir." The words carried weight beyond their simple meaning, and both felt it. Whatever grew between them, respect, friendship, or something deeper, it had survived the divisions of faith and culture. Whether it could survive the coming battle remained to be seen. 20 ships cut through the morning fog, their prows aligned like the teeth of some great beast preparing to devour Ulfa's settlement. On the lead ship, Olrun stood beside Jarl Sigurd, her armor gleaming in the weak sunlight that penetrated the mist. Behind them, Bjorn watched the approaching shoreline, his face solemn. "Ulfa expects us to cower behind our walls," Olrun reminded the assembled chieftains before they boarded their ships. "He gathers his forces slowly, believing he has time. We will show him his error." Now, as Ulfa's settlement appeared through the thinning fog, that confidence was tested. Smoke rose from longhouse chimneys, people moved about their morning tasks, unaware of the fleet bearing down upon them. This was not a monastery filled with unarmed monks but a settlement of warriors, warriors who had families. Olrun felt a moment of doubt. Was this the leadership she sought, bringing death to those who had done her no direct harm? As if sensing her thoughts, Bjorn moved to her side. "You hesitate," he observed quietly. "I see women and children ashore," she replied, her voice equally low. "They are not our enemies." "Then perhaps there is another way to achieve victory without slaughtering innocents." Olrun looked at him sharply. "Speak quickly. We have little time." "Target Ulfa himself," Bjorn suggested. "Challenge him directly, a holmgang on the shore. If you win, his warriors must acknowledge your victory and cease their planned aggression against your alliance. And if I lose? Then your alliance remains to continue the fight, but you will have shown honor that even Ulfa's men must respect." Olrun considered the proposal, testing it against what she knew of Ulfa. The Jarl was proud, renowned for his personal combat prowess. He would not refuse a direct challenge without losing face before his warriors. "A chieftain who will not fight his own battles deserves no followers," she murmured, recalling her father's words. "Signal the other ships to hold position." When they beached the lead ship, Olrun strode ashore with only Sigurd, Bjorn, and 2 of her warriors as escort. The settlement's alarm had already been raised, men rushing to arm themselves, women gathering children to safety. "I seek Jarl Ulfa," Olrun called out, her voice carrying across the strand. "Let him face me in honorable combat." A tall figure emerged from the largest longhouse, grey-streaked beard framing a face marked by battle scars. Ulfa approached slowly, surrounded by his huskarls, his calculating eyes assessing the fleet waiting offshore. "What trickery is this?" he demanded. "You bring an army yet speak of honorable combat." "The army ensures you treat with us fairly," Olrun replied. "But I offer you a choice, Ulfr Grimson. Face me in Holmgang here and now. If you win, my alliance will withdraw and trouble you no more. If I win, you swear to end your raids against our settlements and recognize our territorial boundaries." Ulfr laughed harshly. "You expect me to cross swords with a woman? What next? Shall I wrestle with children and boast of my victories? Are you afraid, Ulfr?" Sigurd called out. "The woman you mock drove your raiders from her shores not a fortnight past. Perhaps you fear she will send you to the afterlife as well." Anger flashed across Ulfr's face. "I fear nothing, least of all Frey's daughter playing at being jarl." "Then prove it," Olrun challenged, drawing her sword. "Unless you prefer to watch your settlement burn around you when our warriors come ashore." Trapped by pride and practicality, Ulfr growled his acceptance. "Prepare the dueling ground. Let us settle this quickly." As Ulfr's men marked out the traditional square for Holmgang, Bjorn helped Olrun check her armor and weapons. "He is stronger than you," Bjorn warned quietly, "but slower. Use your speed, and do not let him corner you against the boundary." "You have fought him before," Olrun realized. "My father did," Bjorn nodded. "It was his final battle before fleeing to England. He survived but carried scars until his death." Olrun gripped his arm briefly. "Then I shall avenge your father as well as protect my people." "Be careful," Bjorn said, his voice dropping further. "There is much yet I would say to you that cannot be said before battle." Their eyes held for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, both recognizing that whatever grew between them had taken root too deeply to ignore. "Then I shall have to survive to hear it," Olrun replied softly before turning toward the dueling ground. The Holmgang began with a clash of shields that echoed across the water. Ulfr attacked with the fury his reputation promised, each blow powerful enough to shatter bone had it connected fully. Olrun gave ground strategically, letting his greater weight and strength expend itself against air when she could. Blood soon stained the sand, both combatants wounded but fighting on. Olrun's quicker movements kept her alive, but Ulfr's experience showed in his patient pursuit, gradually maneuvering her toward the boundary markers. "You fight well for a woman," Ulfr taunted, breathing heavily. "But you tire. Soon you will join your father in the afterlife." "My father taught me never to waste breath on empty words," Olrun replied, circling away from the corner he tried to trap her in. The duel continued, each fighter seeking advantage, neither finding the opening that would end the contest. Then Olrun stumbled slightly on the uneven ground, and Ulfr lunged forward, his sword driving toward her exposed side. In that moment, Olrun twisted with a dancer's grace, letting his blade slide past her armor as she brought her own sword up in a swift arc that opened his sword arm from wrist to elbow. Ulfr roared in pain, his weapon falling from nerveless fingers. Olrun kicked the sword away and placed her blade at his throat. "Yield," she commanded. Pride warred with reality in Ulfr's eyes. Around them, warriors from both sides watched in tense silence, waiting for his decision. "I yield," he finally grated out, the words clearly ashes in his mouth. A cheer went up from the Alliance warriors on the ships and shore. Olrun lowered her sword, knowing that humiliating him further would only breed future conflict. "You fought with honor," she said loud enough for all to hear. "Now honor your pledge. No more raids against our settlements. Respect our boundaries, and we shall respect yours." Nursing his wounded arm and pride, Ulfr nodded curtly. "It is done. Now take your ships and go, before I reconsider the wisdom of keeping my word." As they returned to their vessels, Bjorn walked beside Olrun, supporting her when her adrenaline began to fade and her own wounds made themselves felt. "You spared him unnecessary shame," he observed. "That was wise. A defeated enemy who retains honor is less likely to seek revenge," she replied. "Another lesson my father taught me." Bjorn smiled. A lesson many Christian kings would do well to learn. Aboard the ship, as they turned toward home, Olrun looked back at Ulfa's settlement receding behind them. She had come seeking a battlefield victory but had achieved something rarer, victory with honor, and peace without wholesale slaughter. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps her father had seen in her not just a warrior worthy of leadership but someone who might lead their people in new ways, toward a future where strength meant more than simply the sharpest sword. The Thing assembly gathered under clear autumn skies, free men from across the fjords seated in a great circle on the ancient meeting grounds. At the center stood the law speaker, keeper of traditions and mediator of the assembly's decisions. Beside him waited Olrun and Hakon, the two claimants to the position of chieftain. Word of Olrun's victory over Ulfa had spread throughout the region, along with tales of the alliance she had forged. Yet tradition ran deep, and no woman had ever been chosen as chieftain in living memory, or in the sagas of their ancestors. "We gather to determine who shall lead our clan following the death of Jarl Frey," the law speaker announced. His brother Hakon claims the right by blood and tradition. His daughter Olrun claims the right by her father's declaration and her proven deeds. From his place among the assembled men, Bjorn watched the proceedings with keen interest. Though he had no vote as a foreigner and former thrall, his position as Olrun's advisor had become accepted, if still somewhat controversial. Hakon spoke first, his voice carrying across the assembly. "For generations, our people have followed the natural order. Men lead in war and governance, women tend the household and family. This is not merely our custom but the way of the gods themselves. Would you have a woman lead our warriors into battle? Would you have her negotiate trade with other jarls who would see her gender as weakness? I am Frey's blood, his brother who fought beside him for 30 winters. The chieftaincy should pass to me, and through me to my son, preserving the proper succession." Murmurs of agreement rippled through some sections of the assembly, particularly among the older men. The law speaker nodded to Olrun, indicating her turn to speak. She stood tall, dressed not in feminine finery but in the attire of a chieftain, rich but practical clothing, her father's arm ring on her bicep, his sword at her hip. "I do not ask you to make me chieftain because I am Frey's daughter," she began, her clear voice reaching every ear. "I ask you to make me chieftain because I have proven myself worthy of the title. When raiders threatened our shores, I led our defense. When Ulfa gathered forces against us, I forged an alliance that now protects all our fjords. When battle was joined, I fought and bled alongside our warriors." She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of the assembly. "Some say a woman cannot lead. Yet I have led, and our enemies have fallen before us. Some say other jarls would not respect a woman chieftain. Yet Jarl Sigurd and 5 other chieftains followed my battle strategy against Ulfa. Some say the gods ordain that men must rule. Yet the Volva's prophecy named me the Raven's daughter who would lead where men had failed." Olrun paused, letting her words settle into the minds of the voters. "My father did not name me heir in a fever dream or moment of weakness. He named me heir because he saw in me the qualities a leader must possess: courage in battle, wisdom in counsel, and above all, devotion to our people's prosperity and safety. Judge me not by my gender but by my deeds. That is the true measure of any leader." As debate opened among the assembly, voices rose from all quarters. Some supported Hakon's traditional claim, others acknowledged Olrun's achievements. The discussion grew heated at times, with old grievances and new allegiances shaping the arguments. Finally, Jarl Sigurd rose to speak, commanding instant attention as the most powerful ally of their clan. "I came to this fjord doubting that a woman could lead warriors," he admitted candidly. "I offered marriage alliance because I believed that was the proper place for Frey's daughter. I was wrong." He looked directly at Olrun. "This woman outthought Ulfa's raiders. She proposed the alliance that now protects all our settlements. She faced Ulfa in Holmgang when men twice her size might have hesitated. The gods judge us not by our form but by our courage, wisdom, and honor. Olrun Freydottir has shown all 3. A hush fell over the assembly as his words sank in. Then another voice spoke, Kolbein, the grizzled warrior who had doubted Olrun before the first raid. "I sailed with her father for 20 years, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Frey could spot a worthy leader at 100 paces. If he named her heir, he saw something in her that perhaps we are only now beginning to see. I say we honor his judgment in our own eyes. The girl has proven herself a warrior and a leader. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the law speaker called for the assembly's decision. Each free man placed a stone upon one of two piles, white for Olrun, dark for Hakon. As the counting proceeded, tension thickened the air. Bjorn found himself holding his breath as the final tally approached. He had witnessed Olrun's journey from proud, sometimes harsh warrior to thoughtful leader, had seen her grow into the role her father envisioned for her. Somewhere along that journey, his admiration had deepened into something more profound, something neither his monastic vows nor their cultural differences could extinguish. The assembly has decided, the law speaker announced finally. By the will of the thing, Olrun Freydottir shall be chieftain of Ravnfjord. A roar went up from her supporters, drowning out the disgruntled murmurs from Hakon's faction. Olrun stood motionless for a moment, the weight of her achievement washing over her. Then she raised her hands for silence. I accept the honor and the burden the thing has granted me, she declared. I will lead with strength in battle and wisdom in peace. But I will also lead differently than those who came before me, for different times call for different leadership. She turned to Hakon, who stood rigid with disappointment and anger. Uncle, your experience and counsel are valuable to our clan. I ask that you serve as my advisor on matters of tradition and trade, where your knowledge surpasses mine. The gesture, offering honor without ceding power, caught Hakon off guard. After a moment's hesitation, he gave a curt nod, unable to refuse without appearing petty before the assembly. As the formal ceremony of investiture began, with oaths sworn and ancestral tokens passed to the new chieftain, Bjorn found himself wondering what his place would be in this new chapter of Ravnfjord's history. He had come as a captive, remained as an advisor, but what would he become to a woman now recognized as chieftain? Later, as celebration fires burned high and mead flowed freely, Olrun found him standing apart from the festivities, gazing out over the fjord's dark waters. You did not join the feast, she observed, coming to stand beside him. It is your triumph to celebrate with your people, he replied. I am still an outsider here. Are you? She turned to face him directly. You have fought for this settlement, bled for it. Your counsel helped shape the alliance that secured our future. You are no outsider, Bjorn Leo Freydson, unless you choose to be. The firelight caught the copper highlights in her hair, transforming her from warrior to something almost otherworldly, a Valkyrie stepped from saga into flesh. What place is there for a Christian among your people, he asked quietly. A man caught between worlds. Whatever place you wish to claim, Olrun answered, her voice softening. As advisor to the chieftain, or perhaps something more. The words hung between them, laden with meaning neither had dared express until now. Your people would not accept a Christian in their chieftain's bed, Bjorn said, though his eyes betrayed his heart's desire. My people just accepted a woman as their leader, Olrun countered with a small smile. Perhaps they are more open to change than you believe. And what of your gods? What of mine? Olrun reached out, her calloused warrior's hand gently touching his face. The seer spoke of new ways that do not break the old. Perhaps our gods are wiser than we give them credit for. Perhaps they understand that love transcends the boundaries men create. Love? Bjorn breathed the word like a prayer. What else would you call this thing between us? Olrun asked. This bond that began in captivity grew through battle, and stands now at the threshold of something neither of us imagined when we first met. Bjorn covered her hand with his own. In my faith, we are taught that God is love itself. If what I feel for you is not divine in origin, then I understand nothing of divinity. Under stars that had witnessed countless human dramas played out upon the fjord's shores, they finally bridged the last distance between them. Their kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with the passion of feelings too long contained. When they finally parted, Olrun smiled. My father once told me that a true leader finds strength not in forcing others to bend to their will, but in finding new paths when old ones lead nowhere. A wise man, Bjorn murmured. I see his wisdom lives on in his daughter. Together they walked back toward the celebration, toward a future neither could fully envision but both were now willing to explore, a future where a female chieftain and a Christian foreigner might find common ground in love, just as they had in battle and council. The saga of Olrun Freydottir, first woman chieftain of Ravnfjord, was just beginning. And like all great sagas, it would be told for generations, how she defied tradition without breaking it, how she led with both sword and wisdom, and how she found strength in the most unexpected of places, the heart of a former enemy who became her greatest ally. In the flickering light of the celebration fires, with the approval of her people secured and the warmth of newfound love beside her, Olrun finally understood what her father had known all along, that true leadership came not from proving others wrong, but from finding the courage to forge a new path when the old ways no longer served. And in that understanding, she had not only claimed her birthright but transcended it, becoming not just her father's heir but a chieftain wholly her own, one whose saga would echo through the fjords long after she was gone.